All right, good morning, nerds. Welcome to the latest installment of Unity Basic Gameplay Tutorials. Uh, Today we are going to be talking about importing animation sets, sprite animations specifically, not 3D animations. We're going to be talking about importing sprite animations and basically creating animations out of things like individual sprites and or sprite sheets. What I'm going to be working with today is some sprite sheets put together by Bonsai Helden. There should be a link in the description, but if I forget, someone please call me out in the comments because I believe everybody deserves credit for their work, and especially with all the AI stealing people's art and taking credit for it nowadays, I don't want to be an an art thief. So credit needs to be given where credit is due. All right, so thank you, Bonsai Helden, for the sprites, and we're going to be going ahead and working with some of these today. I do want to credit him or her, them, credit them. These sprites are really well put together. They're nicely laid out. And what we've got here is we've got a character that has basically two facing directions. There's a left and a right. I realize it's a little hard to see on your guys' screens right now, but they're also divided up by row. So this top row looks to be some kind of an idle animation where she's facing to the left. Idle animation facing right, walk right, shoot left, shoot right, and I think this is supposed to be die left and die right, but I'm not completely positive on those last two, but I think that's her intent, or their intent. So what we want to do here is we want to go ahead and import those into the game. Now there's two ways you may see art brought in, or at least 2D art brought into a Unity project or delivered, and that is either PNG sprite sheets, or you may see it looking a little bit more like this, where you just have individual, a bunch of individual sprites. So what I'm going to do here, the advantage with this one is as I scroll them, you can see them. And I did make a mistake when I took all of the sprite sheet and chopped it up using Photoshop and did a bulk exporter, and for some reason it saved them all as GIFs, but that's okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to import both of these into Unity and look at how we would work with them differently in a Unity project to do animations, so both as a sprite sheet or individual sprites. So the easy way to do this, what I'm going to do here is on the Unity side, I'm going to start out with an animations folder. And again, that's just so that we can keep our stuff looking nice. So I'm going to do an animations folder. I'm going to go in there and we're going to create two folders. And the reason we're going to create separate folders for each character, again, is partially organization, but also as you start working with animations, you get a little bit of file bloat. There's a separate file name for every single animation, etc. And so it can get really kind of big. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to separate these out. I'm going to create a new folder. And we're going to call the first one Red Girl. And that is going to be for the individual sprites. She's wearing a red shirt. And then the sprite sheet we're going to use is going to be Green Girl. So I'm going to create another folder for Green Girl. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to work with Red Girl first, just because the red individual ones are easier in a way. I definitely prefer the sprite sheet method. It's definitely better for so many reasons. And we'll talk about some of those as we go. But for now, for newbies, actually, the individual sprites is a little bit easier to deal with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of these things using a shift highlight. I'm going to drag them all into my Red Girl folder. They are now all in here. And then the other thing that I'm going to do here is, while I'm thinking about this, she doesn't really have any reasonable place in my Pong scene that we've been working on. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a new scene for my animations. So I'm going to go to create. I'm going to go into my scenes folder and then create a new scene. We're going to call that one animations. And I'm just going to go into that scene. And so now we've got kind of a blank slate to work with. Now I'm going to go back into my Red Girl animations and we're going to take a look at some things. Before we get started, it is important to do just a little bit of, cleanup on these files. So I'm going to highlight all of them, and I use the shift click method. So if you click on the first one, hold down shift, click on the last one, you're going to see that they're all highlighted. And we can go up here. Now, we definitely do want to use them as sprites 2D and UI. We are using sprite mode single. The next one will be sprite mode multiple, so we'll get to see what that looks like. But single is great for these because they are all single frames. We're going to go ahead and switch this mesh type to a full rect. We're going to switch that to 0, and we're going to disable the generate physics shapes because, again, those are just things that take up extra memory that don't need to. So I'm going to go ahead and click apply, and we aren't going to notice a whole lot of difference. But all of our files are configured correctly now, and that's great. So if I just click on any individual one, you can see I've got full rect, center, extrude edges, generate physics shape, all that stuff is great. Depending on what I'm doing, I may actually shift the pivot, for example, maybe bottom center or something like that. Really, again, as long as you're consistent with everything, it usually works out pretty well for you. But in this case, I'm not going to worry about it. Okay. The next thing that I'm going to do here is create our animation sets. And this is honestly, if you've got single sprites, this is really pretty easy. The hard part is just figuring out which ones go to which sets. Fortunately for me, all of mine are labeled pretty cleanly in the right order. And so the easiest way to do this, and as with everything else in Unity, there is like 80 ways to do everything. But the easiest way is to just click on the first one, hold down shift, click on the last one. I'm going to drag them up into my hierarchy together. And Unity realizes, oh, I think you're trying to make an animation set. Is that what's going on? And so we can just name this. And since these ones, I picked the entire idle left track. But since I do have red girl and blue girl, I'm going to do red. Let's go. I'm going to do that. Well, let's do that. Red idle left. And you're going to see it creates these animations and it puts her in the middle of the screen. I'm going to go ahead and blow this up a little bit so you can see a little bit better. So I'm going to scale her to 10. Just the X and the Y. You don't really need to scale Z. There's not much point there. And we can see her. One of the things we are going to notice here is that she's not moving. And the reason she's not moving is because the game isn't running. If I click play on the game, it will also play her animation. And we can see her. We should be able to see her. Come on. There we go. We can see her moving. Okay. So this is pretty good. Now, if we don't like the speed, I think this is running a little fast. What we can do is we can change this. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and stop. I'm going to go and find her animation controller, which if you click on her in the hierarchy, under animator, we can see controller. And if we double click on this, we can see her animation set here, which is again, red idle left. And what you have here is a speed multiplier. And if we change that, 1 means go at its normal speed. But we can actually change that to whatever we want. And so for example, because I did want her slower down, I'm going to change that to 0.2. That's going to slow her down a little too much, but that's okay. We're going to hit play and see what happens. And as you can see here, as soon as it launches, come on, there we go. That's maybe a little too slow. I'm not really too happy with that. So we can bump this up. We can bump this up to maybe say a 0.5. And that's looking a lot better to me. I think that 0.5 is a better fit. So we're going to go ahead and just leave that alone. 0.5 is maybe even a little fast. Maybe, I don't know, 0.4. Yeah, that's good. You know, you can basically adjust this as much as you want. Depending on what you're working on, you may want to really refine these animations, but for this, I'm just going to kind of work quick. Okay, so now that we've got that and she looks good, I'm going to go ahead and hit stop. And you're going to notice that I didn't have to change that parameter again after I hit stop. And the reason I didn't is because it's part of the assets. It's technically down here in this animator controller here is where this value is. And if you mess with things in the assets folder, they don't, or they do persist after you stop. So they don't get cleared if you mess with them while the game is running. That can be good or bad depending on your situation. But for me, this is good. All right, so I'm not going to go too crazy here with her, just because I'm going to be mostly focusing on the green girl here in a second. But there's two more things I want to show. If I want to make more animation sets out of some of these other frames, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to grab her idle right, and I'm going to grab all 5 frames that make that up. Again, I'm going to drag those up in here and say idle right. Actually, red idle right. And I am separating those out. And you're going to notice, again, it created some more files here. And it did put her in there. I'm going to go back into my scene view. We're just going to kind of move her over here. And we're going to scale her X and Y to 10 so we can see her. And again, if we run these, now I didn't change the multiplier on this, so righty is going to be a little faster than lefty. But we can definitely see them both kind of moving around. Now, one of the other things that we can do here is a lot of people, when they're doing sprite art things, they don't like this blended look. So this blended look is what we normally see in the, 32-bit era, 64-bit era. But we don't really see this. A lot of people like the more pixelated pixel art look to it. This is more anti-aliased. So if you want to give it that really crisp pixelated look that a lot of people refer to as the 8-bit style, we can actually adjust that if we stop our game, if we highlight all of our things, all of our sprites, and we want to be real careful not to get any extra files in here like this animation set. So now that I've highlighted it, highlighted everything, I'm going to control click and get rid of that one. And you're going to see, again, it brings up our import settings for all 52 textures. We can switch the filter mode. Bilinear filtering is basically the same one that Photoshop uses for enlarges and shrinks. And it smooths things and makes them look a little bit more organic in their zooms. It makes for a cleaner zoom than, it doesn't look as pixelated, but in this case we want that pixelation. So what we can do here is change that filter mode to no filter. And if we do that and then click apply, it's going to really crisp that up, and you're going to see she looks a lot chunkier, which is much more in that 8-bit style. So now that we've got her repixelated, I guess, again, we can kind of choose, we can go back and forth between bilinear and or no filter. But I'm going to go ahead and leave this character. The dark red one is going to stay pixelated, and then we'll mess with the green one in bilinear mode just to have those two differences. Okay, so now it's time to go ahead and look at how to do sprite sheets. So this is everything we need to know for our first one. And I would normally go through and do all of those other animations, except we're not going to be using her for all of those. So I'm good for right now. I'm not going to really do much more with this character. I'm going to be mostly working with the green one. So for the green one, we're going to do almost the exact same process. Now she's on a sprite sheet. So I'm going to grab her entire sprite sheet and just drag that in. And I'm going to start out, we're going to go ahead and just delete the red character for now out of our hierarchy. If I pull up the green character and I drop it in, what you're going to notice is, unsurprisingly, I've got the entire sprite sheet is just on the screen. That's not really what I want. What I want here is I want that character, I want those individual sprites, I want it to look kind of like red was a couple minutes ago. So to do this, what we need to do is we actually need to adjust, and we need to tell Unity this isn't just a single sprite, this is a sprite sheet. And the way that we do that is we go back into our texture menu. So I'm going to click on the texture down here in my hierarchy. And the first thing I need to do is switch the sprite mode to multiple. That's going to tell this that this isn't just an individual sprite, this is actually a sprite sheet. As usual, I'm going to full rect, I'm going to switch the extrude edges to 0, and I'm going to turn off the generate physics shape. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. However, again, it's still, if we zoom in on this, actually, I'm just going to, again, change the scale. It is still registering as a single sprite sheet, or as basically all one sprite. Oh, it doesn't know what sprite it is. That's why this is happening like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this out of the hierarchy for now. We don't need that there. But what we need to do is now tell Unity where those individual sprites are within the sprite sheet. So I'm going to click on my sprite editor, and I should get a screen that looks something like this. Now, it's entirely possible, depending on how you configured your Unity project, this might not work for you, and you might be seeing an error message right now. And if that's the case, we're going to show you how to fix that. But even if you did get into this screen, you should probably watch what we're about to do, because it would actually help you out a lot if you ever have missing packages or things that you need to edit. So we're going to go, I'm going to Alt-Tab here into another project and show you a different thing that could have happened. So there we go. Okay, so this is, I'm going to try the exact same thing. So I've clicked here on my sprite sheet. I've already made my other adjustments here. I'm going to click on Sprite Editor, and I get an error message. No Sprite Editor window registered. Please download the package from Package Manager. So if you're seeing something like this, or you ever do see something like this, what we need to do to fix it is to launch Package Manager and just add that package. So I'm going to click OK. I go up to my window and hit Package Manager. And what I've got here is I've got all the packages that are installed in my project, which is sort of useful. There might be some things in here I might want to delete. But really what I'm trying to do here is add some new things. So what I'm going to do is this top part here is a drop down. And if I click it, one of the options is Unity Registry. So I've got the things that are in my project, but Unity Registry is all the things I could potentially download that are like official Unity things. Now, it might be tempting to install all of these, but you really shouldn't, because there's way more in here than you need, and some of them may play havoc in your game. For example, we're definitely making a 2D project right now, but we could install the XR integration tool or interaction toolkit. That's a lot of fun, but it's not going to help us in the current project, and it's just going to add a lot of extra memory and some extra bloat, and potentially cause problems. So we really don't want to do that. But the package that we do want is this 2D sprite package. So if I click on install, it's only going to take a few seconds to install. It's going to compile. And when I was doing this in my warm-up, it did seem to go pretty quickly. So we're just going to kind of sit here for just a second. It does, depending on your internet connection speed, it can take some time. But as you can see for me, it did install pretty quickly. Some of the other packages are a lot heavier and may take quite a bit longer, but that one's pretty tight. So we're going to go ahead and close this window, click on my sprite again. Now when I click on Sprite Editor, that screen comes up just like it did in my other window. And now you've learned how to install a package using Package Manager. More specifically, you've learned how to install the Sprite Editor, which is a really good thing. So I'm going to minimize this Unity project and just go back to my original one, because this is the one I really want to edit. And we're going to take a look. Now, there's a couple different ways to do this, depending on how well the designer or the sprite artist has set up your project. Now, in my case, the artist, Bonsai Helden, actually did a great job. And this is a fantastic sprite sheet. So we're going to do this the easy way. Now, unfortunately, if I click on the sprite option here, this sprite dropdown, one of my options is automatic. And you might think, especially after all the compliments I've been giving the sprite sheet, that that's the way to go. But if I click on this, you're going to notice a lot of problems here, especially if you've been using Unity for a while. Now, some of these are really great. Like this top one is probably okay. This entire top row is probably okay. But as we start moving down, it gets less and less okay. So yes, it is wrapping neatly around each sprite, but the thing that we have to worry about in Unity is the fact that it measures everything from the centers. And because it measures everything from the center, we can have quite a few problems. The problem is if everything has a different center point, we're not able to know, Unity doesn't know where the center point should be, and it's going to create some really weird abnormalities with our animation as we progress. We definitely don't want that. So what we're going to do instead is we're just going to manually do everything. And I can count the number of times on like one hand that the automatic sprite editor has actually done what I wanted it to do. So we're just not gonna, I would just avoid that one like the plague anyways. But what we can do is grid by cell count. And grid by cell count is probably the easiest. If we click on that one, really all you need to know is how many sprites are in the sheet in the X and the Y directions. And if the sprite editor has, or the sprite designer has laid them out evenly, this should just give you automatically what you need on the first go. So all I'm going to do here is count my sprites going across, which I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to count my sprites down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I have an 8 by 8 spreadsheet. So I have 8 columns, I have 8 rows, and if I hit slice, we can see that these red lines neatly sliced up, and it got all of these pretty perfectly, including if I zoom in, you can even see the bullets here are perfect. Everything is looking really good. So everything is great. Alternatively, if you know the measurements of the sprites, you can use that method instead. So I'm going to switch over to using that method. So I'm going to hit slice here. But I could do it differently if I wanted to. I could do grid by cell size. And if I happen to know how big they are, or the artist told me, in this case, I do know that all of them are 48 by 48. If I hit slice, again, it's going to give me just the same look because they are all 48 by 48. But let's go ahead and take a look at this. So what I want to do here is I want to break these apart slightly. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. One of the things I don't like about this sprite sheet, and they were trying to keep things square, and they were trying to account for the fact that they added muzzle flash to their sprites, and that's why the sprites are so wide. But because they're so wide, they basically made them vertically tall, and they created some space above and below, mostly to keep that center of mass in the center. But that's also going to throw off what I want, which is I want them to be a little bit tighter to the sprite. And so the other thing that I want, just because I'm going to pretend, is maybe I don't want the muzzle flash on here because I want to animate something with particles instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually slice up this sprite to make the characters a little bit tighter and to get rid of the muzzle flash, which I probably wouldn't do in a case like this. But really what I'm trying to do is demonstrate how to do manual slicing if the sprite sheet needs it, or if you don't have as nicely laid out sprites as I do, or whatever your other purposes might be. So, so we're going to pretend that the muzzle flash is bad. Again, maybe I want to do particles, maybe I just don't like it, I don't know. But we're going to get rid of that muzzle flash, but keep the character, and then make that box a little tighter around the characters. We do still need to center it though, so I need to leave enough room for the gun on the right and on the left. So we do need to keep that into consideration. The other thing that we need to keep in consideration is I've been looking over the sprite sheet quite a bit, and what it's probably hard to tell here, but she is a little bit taller in some of her frames than she is in some of the other ones. So we do need to kind of pay attention to that as we're slicing as well. So we'll take all that into consideration as we're working. So if we open up the slicing window and we are doing grid by cell size, there's a few things that we notice here. You've got pixel size, that's the size of the sprite itself. You've also got an offset, which is where does the sprite sheet start. Really, I want to kind of start it, instead of up in the top left corner, I really kind of want to start it kind of down in here somewhere. Again, keeping in mind that we need to account for this gun on the left. And we also need to account for the height of the character. So it needs to come down a little bit, but not chop her head off. So for me, I'm going to deal with my Y's first. I don't know why I always deal with Y first because X feels more intuitive, but this is how I've always done it. So we're going to start with the Y. And again, I'm starting with this one here because this is the tallest sprite. So I want to deal with her head first, and then we'll start dealing with things like the feet and stuff. If we start dealing with the size of the sprite sheet first, we can run into some problems because once we adjust the offset, we may need to adjust this again. So it's easiest just to get the offset out of the way first. So I'm going to start with that. So I'm going to just take a guess. And I'm going to say, I think this is 5 pixels. So I'm going to go ahead and in my offset for Y, I'm going to type in 5. And you can see the red line. That's basically where I put it. I didn't do a very good job here. It's only on 5s, or I'm sorry, it's on 5. It looks like it needs to go a little bit further. And I actually know what the real number is because I have played with this a couple times now, but I'm going to misguess it again. I'm going to guess a little too high. I'm going to say 9. And as we can see, I just chopped part of her head off. So that's not good. What I want to do is backtrack that, but I can kind of see, hey, that's 1 pixel off. So we're going to backtrack that and put an 8 in on the Y offset. And now what I can see here, and unfortunately when you go to drag and move the position, it does get rid of your slice window, but if you just click it, it'll bring it back. So what I usually do is kind of drag over. I'm going to hit slice just to see. That one's still good. That one's a little high. That's okay. It's okay to have too much room as long as we have enough. And again, I'm just going to click and kind of look at some of these other ones. They're all looking pretty good. Okay, so I did a pretty good job there. So again, I'm going to go back to the tall one. I'm going to hit slice, and now I want to figure out how tall is she. And so again, I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to say, how tall do I think that is? Okay, I'm going to guess 30 pixels. And I got pretty close, but it looks like I chopped a couple pixels off the bottom of her feet. So I'm going to pick 32 instead. And I'm going to do the exact same thing I just did. Is I'm going to just check her out in a few different spots. And just make sure that it still looks good. And that's doing pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with 32. I can see the red line on the bottom. I'm getting her whole body in here. I want to check it up against some of the other sprites, but the problem that I'm going to have right now is it thinks that they're packed really close together once I've accounted for that offset, so I'm really cutting some of these girls in half. Obviously, that's not a good look, so we do need to fix that. We're going to fix that on the next step, but I can't use them as any gauges right now because I don't really know the next, I don't know their numbers. Okay, so we're going to assume that my 8 and 16 are good. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to do another. Now what I want to do with my slice is figure out what's in between the two, and that's our padding number. Now, I do know that these used to be 48 tall. I've already used 40 pixels, so I'm going to just take a stab at this and say this is probably 8. Except it's not. Oh, wait, haha, 32. Since I do need to make 48 out of this, this needs to be 16, I think. And if I type in 16, what you're going to notice is, again, I'm at the top here. I could have guessed and checked. Oh, maybe I think it's 18. Oh, I went too far. Whoops. Sorry, that's 118. That's way too far. 18 is too far. Maybe I went 15. That's not quite far enough. That was 5. Oh, look, 16 is the magic number. Okay, and again, what I'm going to do here is just look through some of the sprites. I'm going to find some tall ones and some short ones, and just make sure that my line is not chopping off any part of her head. Okay, so those all look pretty good. And now that I've got my vertical padding set up, I don't know why that's freaking out every time, but I can basically just kind of spot check some different spots on this sprite sheet. And I'm really just looking for that vertical alignment. Are all of these inside where I think they should be? And these are all looking pretty good. Okay, she's a little high there, but if we go over to the right, there is one where she's stepping a little lower. Maybe it's over here. She is a little higher on that frame. Okay, so there's a couple frames where she's a little high, uh, but there's other ones where it's on the right size because, like, for example, this one. So we're just going to kind of live with those minor imperfections. I think she, like, sort of lifts a little bit when she shoots. I'm not quite sure, but this is pretty good. Okay, so now what we want to do is kind of do the same thing for the left side, basically all the way around for our X controls. So we're going to look at the gun itself. And what I want to do is I want to get the gun again. I don't want these pixels here, but I do want to kind of preserve the entire size, the horizontal size. So I need to go from the left side of this gun to the right side of this gun. And we're really only trying to chop out the muzzle flash. So again, I'm going to ballpark this, and I'm just going to kind of fast forward a little bit. I figured out last time when I was working on this that the offset should be 4, and you can see that that just moves this in. And so now I just need to worry about the sprite's width, which is coming over to this guy here. And basically, if I take 4 off of each side, that's a total of 8. So I'm going to guess that she's 40 wide. So I'm going to guess X is 40, and sure enough, that's a pretty good fit for both the left side of her and the right side of her. And then again, I figured 4 off of each side, that's going to be a total of an 8-point padding. And if I do that, I've got it neatly chopped off on all of these. And that's really looking pretty good all the way around. So I've basically created these much, much smaller boxes around each sprite. They're a lot tighter. I'm going to hit slice, and I have a lot tighter gaps here. Now that I've got that, I'm pretty happy with how that looks, but I can definitely take this last opportunity to kind of just look at each individual sprite and make sure that I like them all. But I've already checked these numbers. I know that they're good, but I could be looking around here. I'm not thrilled with the extra padding here, and if I had more time, I might go through and refine them separately. But then I would have to hit center points for each of these, and I don't really want to mess with that right now. That's kind of more of an advanced trick. So what I'm going to do is inside of my window here, I also have an apply. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And what we can see here, now it's safe to close this editor window, and what we can see here is inside of my sprite sheet, I have just a ton of extra sprites, but they're all basically set up the way I need them set up. At this point, what I can do is exactly what I did in the previous stage of the tutorial, is I'm going to grab all of my idle lefts, and I'm going to basically drag them up here and create green idle left. And I'm going to do that with basically a bunch of these. So I'm going to kind of rush this, but it's the same step I've been doing over and over again. I'm going to grab my next 5. I'm going to call these guys green idle right. I'm going to grab these movement ones and call this green move left. We're going to grab the next batch. Let's see. Looks like from here to here. We're going to call these ones green move right. And you're going to notice it's creating all these files as we go. We're going to need those later. So we're going to go green shoot left. And green shoot right. And we've basically created all 6 of the animations we need. Again, we're not going to use the last handful of these. They're for the death animation that we don't need for this tutorial, so I'm not going to worry about those ones. But I could add those if I wanted to. It's also created 6 new animator controllers, and it's created 6 new animation sets. We'll need those for the next tutorial. I don't think we're going to use the animation controllers, but it's not hurting them to be there. And if we want to look at these and see what we've got so far, again, I'm gonna scale these up a little bit. So I'm gonna highlight all of them using the shift click trick. I'm gonna do 10x and 10y, and we can see that they're just kind of all on top of each other. And if I run my game right now, it's gonna look a little silly, because right now they're just kind of all on top of each other, and that's definitely not what we want. But I can also click these guys and just drag them into their own little areas. I'm just going to kind of separate these out. And I'm just kind of dragging them separated just so we can kind of see what we've got. Okay, so if we run this now, what we have is we have 6 distinct characters. And that's great, but really what we want is we want these to be blended all into the same character, right? So if I walk left, she walks left. If we walk right, she walks right. We don't really want it set up so that they're all separate pieces. We want her kind of integrated and running the correct animation as needed. Okay, so that's what we're going to do in the next tutorial. We'll get her set up and separated out. Or not separated out, actually we'll merge her all into one cohesive animation set. If I did move this around right now, for example, if I took this running animation and I moved it left, it would move to the left using the code that we've already written, like what we used for the paddle, for example, but she would still be animating to the right, and that's not exactly what we want. We want it to animate properly. So we'll do that on the next tutorial. So just to recap what we've talked about today, we learned how to import sprite sheets. We learned how to create animation sets. We learned how to activate the sprite editor wizard or sprite editor and how to slice sprites inside of that if we have a multiple sprite sheet. We also learned how to add packages in Package Manager. So this has been a pretty packed tutorial. So I'd love it if you join us for the next one, where we're going to learn how to integrate all these animations into one cohesive, what we would think of as a sprite, one cohesive sprite that has all the different animations. So I'd like you to, hopefully you'll join us next time. Please like and subscribe if you found this helpful. And as always, when we close, keep on creating. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.